The silence weighed more than a star. Commander Eva Rostova felt it in her bones, a pressure that the Pathfinder's inertial dampeners could not erase. She stood on the command deck, a silhouette against the holographic chart of the Seraphim Ring. The system was a graveyard, 1 trillion tons of shattered habitats and derelict orbitals, tracing a perfect broken circle around a dying white dwarf. At its heart lay the anomaly, a void in space-time that sensors refused to properly resolve. It did not reflect light or emit radiation. It simply was a patch of absolute nothing that hummed a single silent note across every spectrum. This was her destination, the source of a legend whispered for 1,000 years, the resting place of the Anchor of Saints. "Status Kalen," she said, her voice a low counterpoint to the bridge's quiet efficiency. Her tactical officer, a man whose face seemed carved from asteroid iron, tapped a console. "No change, Commander. The Vorn Ascendancy cruiser Verdict maintains a parallel course just outside the legal exclusion zone. They are loud on comms, silent on sensors. They want us to know they're watching." The recycled air tasted of ozone and anxiety. Rostova nodded, her gaze fixed on the void. The Vorn were cosmic legalists, a species who saw the universe as a set of immutable laws they were uniquely qualified to enforce. They were also carrion birds, picking over the bones of fallen civilizations for relics to add to their grand, sterile archive. They claimed history by right of precedent. Magister. The Pathfinder's integrated fleet mind spoke in the calm, synthesized tones of pure logic. "Commander, the Vorn hail us again. Their petition is unchanged. They cite the Interstellar Salvage Accords, Article 7, Section 4. Objects of significant historical or technological value in unclaimed space fall under the custodianship of the nearest recognized sovereign power. They argue their proximity gives them superior claim." Rostova let a small, bitter smile touch her lips. Proximity. They had only arrived an hour after her own vessel warping in with a roar of displaced reality that had rattled the teeth of every crew member. The low, resonant hum that vibrated through the deck plates seemed to deepen in response. "They can cite whatever they wish, Magister," Rostova replied. "We are here on a mandate from the Terran Confederacy to investigate a potential first contact scenario. The Accords are clear about that too. Until we determine what the anomaly is, it is a protected site. Tell them to wait their turn." Her reflection in the forward view screen showed a woman drawn taut. Her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes holding a deep weariness that warred with a core of unyielding resolve. She did not believe in saints or holy relics. She believed in her orders, her crew, and the cold arithmetic of survival. Their law was a hammer, and every problem was a nail. "They will not wait long," Kalen muttered, his fingers ghosting over the tactical display. "The Verdict is a judgment-class vessel. It outmasses us 3-1, and its armament profile is definitive. We are not here to fight them," Rostova stated, her tone leaving no room for argument. "We are here to understand. Yorick, what is engineering's read on the null space?" From his station in the engineering pit, Chief Engineer Yorick looked up. He was older than the rest of the bridge crew, his face a web of lines earned in the engine rooms of a dozen ships. "It's not null space, Commander. It's sleeping. The energy readings are impossibly low cycling on a quantum level. Whatever is in there is running on fumes, but the systems are coherent. There's a ghost of a containment field and something else. A sigil, maybe. A repeating energy pattern in the shape of a balanced scale." A shiver, unwelcome and unprofessional, traced its way down Rostova's spine. A balanced scale. the symbol of the legendary Saint Judicars of Old Terra. The legends were meant to be parables, not blueprints. She had read the files. The Anchor of Saints was supposedly the flagship of that ancient order, a vessel that did not conquer, but judged. It was said to have ended the automaton wars, not with overwhelming firepower, but by turning the enemy's own logic against itself, creating a cascade of self-annihilation. It was an archive of law, a repository of moral calculus, a ship that had supposedly ascended to myth. Now she was floating in front of it, with a ship full of zealots breathing down her neck. The Vorn did not see a myth. They saw a weapon, an ultimate tool of enforcement to add to their arsenal. A civilian freighter pilot on the outer system checkpoint watched the two warships facing off near the ring's heart. He too adjusted the worn photo of his family, clipped to the dashboard. Just a little longer, he whispered to the image of his daughter. One last run, and I'm home for your birthday. He prayed to any god that might be listening that the silent giants would stay that way. The count had begun, and the price was not yet known. The Vorn are deploying drones, Kalen announced, his voice tight. Small scanner type. They're probing the edge of the null field. Rostova watched as a dozen tiny lights detached from the verdict and streaked toward the anomaly. They moved in a precise geometric formation, a testament to the Vorn's rigid, ordered thinking. She felt a strange sense of pity for them. They were about to knock on a door without knowing what lived behind it. Let them, she ordered. Keep all our systems passive. I want them to see us as a non-threat. Magister record everything. Every frequency, every energy pulse, every line of code they throw at it. The Vorn drones reached the edge of the silent space. They began their work, bathing the perimeter in a wash of scanning beams. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the null field flickered. Not like a shield taking a hit, but like a sleeper stirring. The single silent hum deepened, and a wave of unseen energy washed over the system. The ancient law awoke to an unworthy petition. On the Pathfinder's bridge, consoles sparked. Yorick cursed as a power relay blew, showering his station in harmless orange sparks. Energy spike, non-hostile but overwhelming. It's like it just looked at us. The Vorn drones were not so lucky. They tumbled out of formation, their systems fried, their lights extinguished. They drifted dead and silent, new pieces of debris in a system already full of them. A ripple of satisfaction went through Rostova, quickly suppressed. She needed to remain detached. The anomaly responded to a direct interface attempt. Magister reported, its voice unperturbed. Specifically, it responded to the Vorn's attempt to inject a priority access request code. The energy signature of the rejection pulse was educational. It was not a weapon discharge. It was a scaled reciprocal invalidation. Speak plainly, Magister, Rostova clipped. It mirrored their attempt commander. It took the energy and logic of their access code, amplified it, and returned it along the same vector. The Vorn essentially shot themselves with their own bullet, philosophically speaking. This was a mirror that judged what it reflected. A slow, dawning realization began to form in Rostova's mind. The legends, the sigil, the response. It wasn't a warship in the conventional sense. It was something else entirely. It was a test. The Anchor of Saints wasn't sleeping. It was waiting. It was waiting to be shown something, to be taught something. The Vorn had tried to prove their authority, their right to command. They had failed. They had approached a grand arbiter with a demand, not a case. The Vorn are hailing us, Kalen said, a hint of grim amusement in his voice. They are displeased. They are accusing us of electronic warfare, of violating neutrality. Of course they are, Rostova murmured. Deny it, reiterate our mission status, and get me everything on the Saint Judicars. Not the myths magister, the actual historical archives, their legal codes, their operational doctrines. I want to know how they thought. She was beginning to suspect that the key to this door was not a code or an energy frequency. The key was a state of mind. The ledger demanded a worthy entry. For 3 hours, the bridge of the Pathfinder was a whirlwind of data. Rostova absorbed millennia-old texts, parsing the dense formal language of a forgotten order. The Judicars were not warriors. They were auditors, arbitrators, and when necessary, executioners. Their primary directive was not conquest, but the preservation of balance. They believed that any system from a star cluster to a single soul could be measured, understood, and, if necessary, corrected. They did not rule. They balanced the books of civilization. This saint ship, she realized, teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. It was not a tool of subjugation. It was an instrument of cosmic accounting. The Vorn, with their rigid hierarchy and their belief in control, could never understand it. Their entire philosophy was anathema to the principles on which the anchor was built. They were trying to force a lock that required a gentle hand and a specific intent. A single truth can outweigh 1,000 swords. Commander, Jorik called out, his voice filled with a strange awe. The field is changing. After it repelled the Vorn drones, its baseline energy level rose by a fraction of a percent. And it's listening. The ambient sensor arrays are picking up directed passive scans. It's reading us. It's reading the verdict. It's taking our measure. Rostova looked from the ghostly image of the balanced scale on her display to the menacing shape of the Vorn cruiser. The Vorn would try again. Their doctrine did not allow for failure, only for the application of greater force. They would escalate, convinced that the relic was simply a recalcitrant machine that needed to be tamed. They would break themselves against it, and they might take the entire system with them. She had to act. But how to teach is to offer a part of yourself. She couldn't use force. That was the Vorn's way, the very thing the anchor had just rejected. She couldn't use deception. A vessel that could mirror an enemy's intent would surely see through any lie. She had to present a case. She had to prove not her right to command, but her worthiness to serve. To be a steward, not a master. It was a terrifying gamble. It meant revealing everything. Kaelin, open a channel to the anomaly. She ordered, her heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. The tactical officer stared at her. Commander, we don't know what it will do. It fried their drones with a passive surge. The drones were trying to break in, Rostova said, her conviction hardening. We are going to knock politely. Open the channel. Full spectrum, umpires unencrypted. A reckoning cannot be forced. It must be invited. Channel open. Kaelin confirmed, his expression a mask of professional concern. Magister, prepare the complete mission logs of the Pathfinder for transmission. From our commissioning to this present moment. Every course correction, every sensor reading, every communication. Censor nothing. Especially include the logs from the Xanthos quarantine, where we delivered medical supplies under fire, and the evacuation of Cygnus X1. Those had been costly missions. They had lost crew. They had taken damage. But they had held the line. They had chosen to protect, not to conquer. The AI's synthesized voice was flat, but Rostova imagined it carried a note of surprise. Commander, that is a complete disclosure of our operational history and technological capabilities. If the Vorn are monitoring this channel, and they are, It would represent a significant strategic liability. It is, Rostova agreed. But the Vorn are not the ones we need to convince. We are submitting our testimony. We are showing it our ledger. Let it be the judge. The truth is the only key that fits a universal lock. She took a deep breath. Transmit the logs. The data stream began a silent waterfall of light and information pouring from the Pathfinder into the waiting silence. On the main view screen, the Vorn cruiser was a silent monolith. Rostova could almost feel the confusion and suspicion radiating from its bridge. Why would a potential adversary simply hand over its secrets? They could not comprehend an act of vulnerability of trust. To them, it was a sign of madness or a foolish trap. But Rostova was betting on a different kind of logic. A child on the system's main trading hub, a station carved into a massive asteroid, looked out a viewport. She saw the two distant stars of the warships. Her mother told her they were protectors, keeping the bad things away. The girl traced their light on the thick plasteel, humming a nursery rhyme her father used to sing. She did not know she was a part of the equation, a weight on a scale she could not see. The innocent are the true measure of justice. The transmission continued for a full 10 minutes. It was a record of service of difficult choices and necessary sacrifices, a history not of conquest, but of stewardship. When the final data packet was sent, an even deeper silence fell. The deck plates ceased their humming. The ambient energy readings flatlined. For a horrifying moment, Rostova thought she had failed, that she had offered her ship's soul, only to be met with indifference. The Vorn cruiser began to move its weapon ports, glowing with nascent energy. They had interpreted her actions as a final desperate gambit before destruction. And then it happened. The null field did not collapse. It bloomed. Light pure and white and ancient poured out from the anomaly. It was not the harsh light of a weapon, but the soft, clear light of a dawn that had waited eons to break. The energy sigil Jorik had detected the balanced scale, flared into brilliant existence, a construct of pure force 100 kilometers high. It pulsed once a steady rhythmic beat like a cosmic heart, and the entire Seraphim ring resonated with it. A verdict had been reached. On the bridge of the Pathfinder, alarms screamed as the flood of information and energy washed over them. But it was not an attack. It was an embrace. Data streams, elegant and impossibly complex, flowed into their systems not as an intrusion, but as an offering. Star charts of forgotten pathways, engineering principles that defied known physics, philosophical treatises coded into the very structure of the energy. The Anchor of Saints was opening its archives. Magister! Rostova breathed, her hands gripping the command chair. What is happening? It has accepted our petition, Commander, the AI replied. And for the first time in its operational history, Magister's voice carried a distinct tone of awe. It has designated the Pathfinder as temporary adjudicator. We have been granted limited custodianship. Its primary systems are coming online. Its defensive grid is, Commander, its defensive grid is powered by the star itself. The Anchor drew its strength from the heart of the system. The Vorn ship, the verdict, stopped dead in space. The glow from its weapon ports faded. A message stark and clear had been projected into their systems, into their minds, across every open channel. It was not a threat. It was a statement of fact. A single ancient glyph, the balanced scale, followed by a simple declaration. Court is now in session. All claims will be heard. All evidence will be weighed. All sentences will be passed. The Vorn commander, a being of rigid carapace and even more rigid ideology, must have been reeling. This was not a derelict to be salvaged. This was not a weapon to be seized. This was a power beyond his comprehension, a lawful authority more ancient and absolute than his own. He had come to claim a relic and had found himself standing before the judge. He had two choices: retreat in the face of a superior power, or double down and attempt to shatter a force of nature. For the Vorn, whose entire culture was built on the unassailable primacy of their law, there was only one path. The proud cannot bend. They can only break. "Commander, the verdict is charging its primary weapon," Kalen announced. His voice strained. "A spinal lance. They're going to try and core it." Rostova looked at the radiant form of the awakened anchor. It shone with a serene, unshakable confidence. It had judged her and her crew worthy of a temporary trust. Now it was judging the Vorn, and she was its instrument. "The anchor gave us custodianship, Magister. Does that include operational control of its defensive systems?" "Negative, Commander," the AI stated. "It appears our role is not to command it. Our role is to inform it, to provide it with context. It has granted us access to its sensorium and its library of legal precedent. It is asking for our counsel. A teacher must first be a student." This was the true test. Not just to be worthy, but to be wise. She could not think like a warrior ordering a strike. She had to think like a judicar. She had to present a case. "Vorn vessel verdict." She broadcast, her voice steady and clear, amplified by the anchor's own resonant power. "You have been found in violation of sovereign space. You have attempted to illegally seize a protected artifact. You have initiated an act of unprovoked aggression. By the authority granted to me by the Anchor of Saints, I advise you to stand down, power down your weapon, and submit to inspection." The only reply was the rising energy signature from the Vorn ship. Their pride was too great. Their dogma was absolute. To them, the anchor was an anomaly that had to be purged, its strange law replaced by their own. They were the judges, not the judged. They sought to erase a truth they could not comprehend. Rostova's mind raced, sifting through the torrent of data the anchor was feeding her. It was a library of rulings of precedents set across 1,000,000 worlds and 100,000 years. It contained cases of war, of betrayal, of sacrifice, of honor, and within it, she found what she was looking for. A legal doctrine so old it was almost mythological, the principle of reciprocal judgment. An aggressor is to be judged by the same standards they seek to impose. The punishment should be a perfect mirror of the crime. Magister, the Vorn spinal lance. What is its mechanism? It is a graviton shear weapon, Commander. It destabilizes the local space-time metric along a focused axis, effectively tearing its target apart at a fundamental level. It imposes a localized, catastrophic collapse of physical law, Rostova clarified. "A precise summary," the AI agreed. "Then, that is the sentence," Rostova declared. Her heart was cold and heavy. This was not vengeance. This was justice. This was the way of the anchor. "Anchor of Saints. I present my counsel. The vessel verdict seeks to impose a violent dissolution of physical law upon you. I advise a commensurate response, a sentence of temporary dissolution. A judgment once passed is inevitable." She watched the Vorn ship, a black spear aimed at the heart of the light. She had given them a chance to retreat, to choose a different path. They had refused. The law, according to the anchor's own ancient code, was now absolute. The great glowing sigil of the scales pulsed again, but this time it did not release light. It absorbed it. A perfect circle of darkness appeared in the center of the sigil, a void that mirrored the null field from which it had been born. The Vorn ship fired. A lance of pure gravitational distortion, a weapon that could crack a moon, shot across the distance. It was a silent, invisible spear of absolute annihilation. It struck the circle of darkness and vanished. It did not explode. It was not deflected. It was accepted, weighed, and found wanting. The universe itself had become the scales of justice. For a heartbeat, the system held its breath. Then, from the anchor, a response. Not a beam of light or a missile, but something far more subtle. A wave of force identical in every respect to the Vorn's own weapon erupted from the circle of darkness. It was not a copy. It was the original attack turned back upon its sender. The anchor had not fired a weapon. It had simply returned what was sent, a perfect, instantaneous reflection. The graviton lance struck the verdict amidships. There was no sound, no explosion in the vacuum of space. The great warship simply came apart. Not in a shower of shrapnel, but in a clean geometric deconstruction. Its structure, its very physical laws, were temporarily suspended. Hull plates drifted away from their supports. Power conduits unspooled into the void. The crew one could only imagine floated from their stations unharmed, but utterly helpless as their vessel dissolved around them. It was not destroyed. It was adjudicated, rendered inert. Its threat and its philosophy had been fundamentally and peacefully disassembled. A mirror shows no mercy, only the truth. On the Pathfinder, the bridge crew stared in stunned silence. They had just witnessed a battle that was not a battle, the total defeat of a superior foe without a single casualty. Kalen slowly lowered his hands from the tactical console he had been gripping. Yorick was muttering what sounded like a prayer. Rostova let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her body trembled with the adrenaline of the confrontation. She had done it. She had acted as the arbiter, and the anchor had acted as the executioner. The Vorn ship was now a cloud of drifting components, its crew alive, but defeated, waiting for rescue. A rescue that, by the laws of space, she was now obligated to provide. The irony was not lost on her. The first act of her custodianship would be to render aid to the very enemy she had just vanquished. The first duty of the strong is to protect the weak. Magister begins search and rescue operations. Log: every surviving Vorn crew member. Treat them as prisoners of war under the Articles of the Terran Confederacy with all rights and dignities that entails. Acknowledged, Commander, the AI responded. A new message from the Anchor of Saints. It is a query. It appears that by mirroring the Vorn weapon, the Anchor expended a significant portion of its immediately available energy reserves. It is asking for a recommendation on how to replenish them. Rostova looked at the dying star at the center of the system, and then at the trillions of tons of wreckage in the Seraphim Ring. The Anchor had defended itself, but now it was vulnerable. It was a sleeping giant that had roused to swat a fly, only to find the effort had exhausted it. And she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the core that the Vorn were not the only power in the galaxy that coveted such a prize. The verdict was just the first petitioner. Others would come. Cultists who would worship it, warlords who would seek to control it, and empires that would see it as a threat to be destroyed. Her burden was not lifted. It had just been forged. A new alert flashed on Kalen's screen. Commander, multiple warp signatures detected at the system's edge. High-energy non-standard drives. They're not Confederacy. They're not Vorn. He looked up, his face pale. Commander, they're pirate signals. Dozens of them. The blood-sworn Brotherhood. Rostova stared at the tactical display as a swarm of hostile contacts began to resolve. The carrion birds were descending, drawn by the flash of light and the scent of a battle. They would see the disabled Vorn cruiser and the Pathfinder as easy prey. They would have no concept of the power they were approaching, but in its weakened state, the anchor might be vulnerable to a swarm of lesser, more brutish attacks. She had won the legal argument. Now she had to survive a brawl. Her first act as adjudicator had been to disarm a warship. Her second, it seemed, would be far messier. The law is a shield, but sometimes you still need a sword. They are powering weapons, Kalen stated, his voice stripped of all its earlier irony. Dozens of them. It's a chaotic spread. Ballistics, plasma torpedoes, jury-rigged mining lasers. There is no tactical cohesion. He didn't need to add the rest. A disciplined fleet was predictable. A rabid pack was not. They would fire at anything that looked valuable, and in this system, that meant the glittering cloud of Voran wreckage, the Pathfinder, and the immense glowing form of the anchor itself. Rostova's mind was a maelstrom of calculation. The anchor was a god-tier weapon that had just demonstrated its power, but it was also an engine running on empty. The pirates were gnats, but 1,000 gnat bites could kill a lion. Magister, what is the anchor's current energy reserve expressed as a percentage of its last action? The well was deep, but the bucket was gone. Less than 0.1% of the energy required for a reciprocal judgment action, Commander, the AI replied. Its immediate defensive capabilities are limited to minor kinetic shielding and passive sensor disruption. It is, for all intents and purposes, a new god in its infancy. It has memory and potential, but no manifest strength. The recycled air suddenly felt thin, the silence of the bridge thick with unspoken fear. They were guardians of a sleeping giant, armed with little more than a whisper. A pirate captain, his face a mess of ritual scars and crude cybernetics, laughed from the bridge of his scrap hauler-turned warship. Look at it, boys. The Vorn ghost ship cracked open like a prize clam, and the little Confederacy patrol boat that did it. We'll peel the chrome off both of them. First volley on my mark. He was a creature of pure appetite, a man who saw history as something to be melted down for scrap. Every action demands an equal and opposite reaction. They're firing, Kalen said, his knuckles white on his console. A storm of projectiles and energy beams erupted from the pirate fleet, a ragged, uncoordinated wave of pure destruction. It wasn't aimed with precision. It was a broadside against the heavens. Impacts imminent on the Vorn debris field and on our position. Evasive maneuvers, Rostova commanded. Yorick, give me every ounce of power you can squeeze from the reactor. Divert life support from non-essential decks. I want maximum agility. The Pathfinder lurched as thrusters fired, dodging and weaving through the incoming chaos. Plasma bolts seared past the view screen close enough to see them boil the vacuum. A volley of solid slugs hammered against the ship's kinetic barriers, the impacts resonating through the hull like gigantic drumbeats. The cost was immediate. Aft kinetic barrier is down to 40%, Kalen reported. We took a glancing hit on Deck 7. Minor hull breach sealed. No casualties. Their greed was a weapon aimed at themselves. But the real target was the cloud of disabled Vorn components. The pirates descended upon it tractor beams, lashing out cutting torches flaring to life. They were hyenas, tearing at the carcass of a fallen predator. And among that wreckage were the Vorn life pods, hundreds of them helpless and waiting for rescue. They are targeting the survivors, Rostova said, her voice a low growl. They are not pirates. They are butchers. This was the crux of it. The anchor was a vessel of law. How did the law deal with those who recognized no law, not even the right to survive? Anchor, she spoke into the open channel, a prayer to a machine. I require counsel, precedent for engaging an enemy that does not value life, that seeks only entropy. The data stream that flowed into her command chair was not a simple answer. It was a cascade of ancient history, of forgotten wars against berserker swarms and nihilistic cults. And the answer was always the same. When an enemy refuses to be taught, they must be contained. When they worship chaos, they must be given a perfect, ordered cage. A cage is a lesson in the meaning of freedom. Yorick the Seraphim Ring. Rostova said, a desperate plan forming in her mind. The anchor just drew power from the star to fend off the verdict. But the ring itself, it's not random debris. It's too perfect. The chief engineer's eyes widened as he cross-referenced the anchor's data with his own scans. My God, Commander, you're right. It's not a graveyard. It's a machine, a colossal orbital array. The habitats, the orbitals, their power conduits, capacitors, focusing lenses, all dormant. He looked up, a wild hope dawning on his weary face. If we can bring it online, we could recharge the anchor. Not just recharge it, Commander. We could power its original intended function. How? Rostova demanded. What's the ignition key? Magister, Jorik prompted. The AI's cool voice filled the void. The array requires a 3-point resonance activation. 3 specific nodes within the ring must be simultaneously brought online with a precise energy signature. A signature our ship's reactor can produce, but only if we are physically docked with each node. To build requires more courage than to destroy. The tactical display shifted, highlighting 3 shattered orbital stations within the ring kilometers apart. And swarming between them was the pirate fleet. It was an impossible task. They would have to fly into the heart of the swarm dock with a dead station while under fire and repeat the process 2 more times. It was suicide, but it was the only path forward. Kalen plot a course to the first node. Use the largest debris chunks as cover. I want to hug the shadows all the way in. They'll see us the moment we engage the docking clamps, he warned. I know, Rostova said, which is why we need a distraction. She looked at the cloud of Vorn wreckage at the pirates tearing it apart. Anchor, you mirrored the verdict's weapon. Can you mirror their sensors? Can you show them a ghost? The light from the anchor's sigil flickered a soft pulse of acknowledgement. Affirmative, Magister translated. It can create a localized sensor illusion. However, maintaining it will consume the last of its immediate reserves. This was a gamble for the soul of the system. Do it, Rostova ordered. Create a phantom energy signature inside the largest piece of the verdict's hull. Make it look like a reactor about to go critical. They're greedy. They'll swarm to it, trying to either contain it or scoop up the exotic materials before it blows. The anchor's light dimmed almost to nothing, but across the system, deep within the mangled remains of the Vorn cruiser, a new light began to glow. A furious, angry red light that screamed of imminent overload. The pirates reacted instantly. Their chaotic assault faltered as vessels broke off, racing toward the new prize, a moth to a fatal flame. It's working, Kalen breathed. They're taking the bait. Course laid in, Commander, the navigator called. Engaging. The Pathfinder surged forward, a silent hunter in a field of ghosts. It slipped between continent-sized plates of shattered habitat, its hull scraping against the ruins of a forgotten civilization. The sound of metal on metal was a scream that echoed only within the ship. Outside, there was only the silent dance of death and desperation. The past offered a shield for the future. They reached the first node, a wrecked Taurus station that must have once housed millions. Its docking arms were mangled, twisted like blackened bones. Yorick! You have to find a stable power junction. Fast! Working on it, the engineer replied, his voice tight with concentration. The ship shuddered as a stray plasma bolt from the distant scrum struck a nearby asteroid, showering them in vaporized rock. Got it. A primary coolant line. It's intact, extending the power conduit. A heavy probe launched from the Pathfinder's belly, its magnetic clamps locking onto the ancient station with a resounding clang. The transfer of power began. On the main screen, a schematic of the Seraphim ring showed a single line of light appear a nerve fiber in a dead body. A single pirate frigate, smarter or more paranoid than the rest, had noticed their maneuver. It broke from the main swarm engines, flaring as it raced toward them. "Hostile contact, closing fast," Kalen yelled. "They'll be in weapons range in 30 seconds. We can't disengage the conduit without aborting the sequence. A single spark can ignite a forest fire." "Hold your course," Rostova ordered, her knuckles bloodless on the armrest. "All remaining power to the forward shields. Brace for impact." The pirate ship was a thing of brutal functionality, all sharp angles and oversized gun turrets. It opened fire. Green bolts of plasma hammered against the Pathfinder's shields. The forward view screen showed the energy field glowing under the strain, flickering like a dying candle. The ship groaned, a beast in agony. "Shields at 15%. Jorik, how much longer? Almost there. Resonance frequency achieved. Node 1 is active. Disengage. Get us out of here." The conduit retracted as the Pathfinder threw itself sideways, thrusters screaming. A final plasma volley struck where the bridge had been a second before, impacting the ancient station and sending a plume of molten metal into the void. The ship had a new scar, a long, deep gash along its dorsal spine. The cost of the first step. The debt of survival is paid in pain. As they raced toward the second node, a transmission crackled across the open channels. It was from the pirate ship they had just evaded, but it was garbled, overlaid with a chanting hypnotic rhythm. "Magister, clean it up. I want to know what they're saying." The AI filtered the static, and a clear, chilling voice emerged. It was not the voice of a mere plunderer. It was the voice of a zealot. "The silent god has awoken. It bleeds light. It has martyred the men of Iron Law glory to the final entropy. We are the Bloodsworn, the agents of the great unraveling. We have come to give the god its final sacrament, the peace of absolute nothingness." Rostova felt a cold dread that had nothing to do with the battle. These were not pirates. They were a death cult. They hadn't come for scrap. They had come to kill a god. They didn't want to capture the anchor. They wanted to destroy it, believing its destruction was a holy act. This changed everything. You could reason with greed. You could intimidate fear. You could not negotiate with faith. Faith without reason is a blinding light. They are a nihilist sect. Magister stated its voice flat, but somehow carrying the weight of the revelation. Historical archives show similar cults emerging during the Dark Ages. They worship the heat death of the universe. They see order, law, and life as a cosmic aberration to be corrected. Now their chaotic tactics made sense. It wasn't incompetence. It was an expression of their creed. They reached the second node this time, a massive cylindrical structure that looked like the spine of some colossal beast. The docking process was faster, the crew working with a desperate efficiency. But the Bloodsworn were learning. The ghost reactor trick had faded, and the swarm was turning their attention, shifting from the Vorn wreckage to the pinpricks of light appearing on the Great Ring. They began to converge. Their chaos had found a single ordered target. "Multiple contacts, all vectors," Kalen reported, his voice grim. "They're coming from all sides. We won't be able to fight them all off." Rostova looked at the tactical display. The Bloodsworn ships were a disorganized cloud, a hornet's nest kicked over. But their numbers were overwhelming. The Pathfinder was faster and more agile than any single one of them, but it couldn't be everywhere at once. The second node flared to life on the schematic. 2/3 of the circuit were complete. Only one more to go. But the path to the final node was directly through the heart of the approaching fleet. "We're not going to make it," Kalen said, stating the obvious. "Not like this." Rostova's gaze fell on the Vorn crew, their life pods now being tractored in by her own rescue teams, brought aboard for their own safety. And an idea terrible and brilliant took shape. A lesson from the anchor itself. The principle of reciprocal judgment. What is the proper judgment for those who sow chaos? A taste of their own medicine, a mirror of their own disorder. The greatest weapon against chaos is chaos itself. "Magister," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "The blood-sworn fleet, they are networked correct. For all their chaos, they must have a rudimentary command and control network to coordinate their arrival." "Affirmative, Commander. A low-bandwidth, multinodal mesh network. Highly decentralized, difficult to disrupt through conventional electronic warfare." "Don't disrupt it," Rostova said. "Feed it. The anchor is a library of law, of order, of precedent. It must also contain the opposite, records of anarchy, of failed states, of logical paradoxes. Find the most virulent data plagues in its memory, philosophical viruses, contradictory axioms, logic bombs wrapped in scripture. I want you to inject it directly into their network." A seed of doubt planted in the right mind can fell an empire. "Magister, what will this do?" To a disciplined logical system, it would be a minor annoyance easily firewalled. To a network built on faith and fanaticism, a system whose core principle is the virtue of disorder, the injection of pure weaponized paradox could be catastrophic. It would be the equivalent of shouting every possible order to an army of madmen. It will turn their greatest strength, their decentralized chaos, against them. A mirror can reflect madness as easily as light. "Do it," Rostova commanded. "Flood their network. Give them the chaos they worship in a form they cannot control." A thin, almost invisible beam of data shot from the Pathfinder's comms array towards the nearest bloodsworn vessel. The effect was not immediate, but it was decisive. First one pirate ship, then 3. Then a dozen began to veer off course. Their weapon discharges became even more erratic. Some fired on their own allies. Their comms channels, which had been filled with unified fanatical chanting, dissolved into a cacophony of contradictory orders, paranoid accusations, and maddened screams. They were being force-fed a banquet of pure information chaos. Their network had become a conduit for insanity. Their church had become a Tower of Babel. The swarm faltered. Its cohesion shattered. Ships turned on each other, their chaotic tactics now self-destructive. It was the opening they needed. "Full power to the engines," Rostova yelled. "Punch through them! Get us to the final node!" The Pathfinder shot through the fray, a silver needle stitching the final thread of a great circuit. The battle raged around them, a self-consuming firestorm of the Bloodsworn's own making, but their path was clear. They reached the third node, a crystalline structure that pulsed with a faint inner light. The docking clamps slammed home. "Resonance achieved!" Jorik shouted, his voice cracking with triumph. "All 3 nodes are active, Commander. The ring, it's waking up." It started as a trickle, then became a flood. All across the Seraphim Ring, ancient systems came online. Conduits that had been dark for millennia, filled with the light of the White Dwarf, channeling its stellar energy. The shattered orbitals were not just habitats. They were lenses focusing the star's power into a single coherent beam aimed at the heart of the system. aimed at the anchor of saints. The great sigil of the scales, which had been dim and faint, now blazed with a light so bright it eclipsed the star itself. It was no longer a ghost. It was a god fully enthroned. The system had become a cathedral of light. A wave of pure, clean energy washed over the Pathfinder. Its depleted shields recharged in an instant. Its damaged systems began to self-repair, guided by the benevolent data stream from the now fully powered anchor. The ship's lights shone with a new brilliance. The air tasted clean and sharp. They had not just refueled a machine. They had restored a sanctuary. Now came the final judgment. The Bloodsworn consumed by their data-induced madness were still a threat. A rabid dog must be caged. "Anchor," Rostova said, her voice resonating with the newfound power of the system. "Counsel on the final disposition of the Bloodsworn Brotherhood. They are agents of entropy. They cannot be reasoned with. They will not be stopped. What is the sentence for those who wish to unmake all things?" The reply from the anchor was swift and absolute. It was a precedent drawn from the very dawn of time, a ruling against a cosmic horror that had sought to devour young universes. The sentence for the worship of nothingness is to be given it. Not death, not destruction. A perfect ordered and absolute isolation. A lesson must be tailored to the student. Kalen broadcast to the Bloodsworn fleet. A final offer. Power down your weapons, surrender your vessels, and you will be given quarter. The only response was a fresh volley of fire from the few ships still capable of aiming. It spattered harmlessly against the anchor's new brilliant shield. They had made their choice. "So be it," Rostova said softly. "Anchor, execute the judgment." The light of the seraphim ring focused, but it did not form a lance or a beam. Instead, the very fabric of space around the Bloodsworn fleet began to fold. It was not a violent act. It was a precise geometric warping of reality. Space-time itself was being used as a tool. A sphere of distorted reality formed around the pirate fleet, a bubble that reflected the stars in strange, bent patterns. The Bloodsworn were sealed off, cut off from the rest of the universe. "Magister, what is it doing?" Kalen asked in a whisper. "It has created a closed temporal spatial domain," the AI explained. "Inside the bubble time is being rapidly accelerated. For them, millennia will pass in the space of a few hours. They will be able to witness the very entropy they worship. They will watch their ships decay, their fuel run out, their own bodies age and turn to dust. They have been given exactly what they wanted, an eternity of nothing. It is the ultimate lesson, a perfect mirror of their faith." Their prayers had been answered in full. On the bridge, silence reigned. The battle was over. The Vorn were rescued, their disassembled ship waiting to be pieced back together. The Bloodsworn were contained, a monument to their own failed philosophy. The anchor of saints was awake, its power restored, its purpose clear. And Eva Rostova, commander of a simple patrol vessel, was its chosen steward. The weight of that responsibility was heavier than any star. She ordered the full rescue of the Vorn, who were now humbled silent witnesses to a power that dwarfed their own rigid doctrines. She began the long process of cataloging the Seraphim Ring's systems, of learning the full extent of the anchor's knowledge. She knew that word would spread, that this system would become a focal point for the entire galaxy, a place of pilgrimage, of fear, and of endless contention. The Seraphim Ring glowed with a soft, permanent light, its orbital pathways now traced in silver energy, a testament to a law reborn. On the anchor's vast holographic ledger, a new entry blinked into existence next to the case of the verdict. It read, Stunfield the Blood-Sworn Brotherhood. Disposition contained. Precedent established. The Mirror of Entropy. Rostova stood before the view screen, looking at the silent bubble that held her former enemies a new permanent star in the sky. Her job was not to conquer. It was not even to rule. It was to listen, to learn, and to counsel. The law was not a weapon to be wielded or a cage to be locked. It was a lesson to be taught, a truth to be revealed. And some truths could only be seen in the reflection of a perfect mirror. The court was permanent. The judge was eternal.